Hi, Kathryn. Welcome to Unpause the Menopause. We're so thrilled to have you with us today. Thanks so much for coming in. I hope you're well. And we tend to start off each episode with a little insight into each of our guests. So we ask them about their morning routine. How do you set up your day so that you have a nice, productive day?
It's funny you should say that because I literally just this week, my kids have been on half term and then they went back Monday, and I downloaded an app to help me with the morning routine. And it's actually been really good. So since Monday, so what are we on now? Wednesday. Wake up, have a glass of water as soon as I wake up, get up 10 minutes earlier so that I've definitely got time for breakfast. And my plan for next week is to add into it to do 10 minutes of stretch. So in an ideal world, that would be my routine. Listen, I'm not going to be smug and say that this is going to last for that long, but it's certainly made me feel better the days where I've done it. So there's a lot. So I think I'm like most people. I have good intentions, and I go through periods of being really good, and then sometimes I can just be lazy, stay in bed a bit too long, have a coffee, scroll on my phone, which is the worst way to start the day. So I'm really trying. I'm trying with my morning routine. I'm not great first thing, to be honest. It takes me a little while to get going, but I'm trying.
What's the name of the app you're using?
It's called Fabulous. It's called Fabulous, and it's about. It's supposed to be a psychological take on habits, on forming habits. So, doing one little thing for a few days before you add on another one. So small, manageable things that become routine.
I'm all for that. Small changes each time, and then you can make big changes in your life if you take them on. I'm really interested to hear about your background today. I've read up on you quite a lot, Kathryn, and I'm just so excited that we're going to get to chat properly and delve into your expertise. But could you tell our listeners perhaps a little bit about your journey to where you are today and what your background has been, please?
Yeah, of course. So my background was working in the NHS. So I worked in psychological services, so working with mild to moderate anxiety, depression, panic, those kind of things. And as part of that, I was lucky enough to do some training in CBT for insomnia, which is not particularly, there isn't a lot of training around and not a lot of people have been trained in it. So I just happened to be there on the day that the training happened. And I absolutely loved it straight away. I loved it. It was so black and white. I loved the rationale behind it. So I started taking on all of the insomnia and poor sleep people. And at the time, there was sort of a bit of a movement to thinking that, insomnia wasn't just a secondary condition. Sometimes poor sleep and insomnia can be your main problem. Other things are exacerbating it, but that's the thing that you really want to fix. So I started working with people and loved it. And then I was made redundant on maternity leave. So I decided to just set up a clinic, do one-to-ones. And that went fantastically. That took off. There's massive demand for it, so that took off. But I was aware that I was really limited to how many hours I had, and a lot of people can't do that, can't travel. So I trained a network of therapists so that we could offer it around the UK. So people would come to the website, we'd send them off, and they would see a trained therapist. And then about 4 years ago, I'd been listening to, I'm sure you've heard of Tony Robbins. I was listening to a audio thing of his, and I thought, actually, this would be a really good way to increase access to this material by doing something in an audio basis. So I recorded these videos, put it all together as an online course. And actually, that's been the main focus now of my business for a few years. And with COVID, it was good timing because people couldn't go and see someone anyway. And I've always just been really keen to make CBT for insomnia is a very effective method of treatment for poor sleep and insomnia. But the access is terrible. There's very little access. GPs have nowhere to send anyone. It's not covered by private health. So it's really difficult to get access. So one of my priorities has always been, how can as many people as possible access this material in an affordable way? And so the focus has been the online course. And as I say, COVID was good timing, actually, for me, because it made online things very normal. So I wasn't having to sell the fact it was online. And then over that time, I started seeing ladies with menopausal issues coming through the clinic or taking the course. And so I started to focus on that market as well, and saw that there was really no help. There's a lot of marketing things, a lot of gimmicks, but in terms of actual evidence-based research for women in that situation, there wasn't a lot. So I've really enjoyed working with women, actually, to help them.
And the women you're seeing at the perimenopausal and menopausal stage, does this tend to be the first time that they present with sleep issues?
I'd say a mixture, actually. Some people have had sleep problems on and off, and then they're massively exacerbated by any symptoms around menopause. Equally, there are people who will come and say, I've never had a problem sleeping. I was 8 hours every night, and then as soon as they've gone into menopause or perimenopause, then it's kickstarted it, or it's triggered it. So, and I think the thing is that whatever the trigger is, once it's happened, then you start to feel anxious and stressed about it. So then that gets involved as well, and it starts to spiral. So there's so many different parts that are playing a problem in the poor sleep, and unfortunately, the menopause is sort of a perfect storm of all of those things happening in one go. So it sort of makes sense.
Do you want to explain some of the science or the biology or whatever behind the most common reasons that people start to experience sleep problems in menopause?
So I don't profess to be medically trained in this at all, but my the reason that women struggle during this time is that as estrogen drops, we are more likely to have the hot flushes. So estrogen is one of the hormones which is controlling temperature. So as we know, hormones are controlling all these different elements of our body and our well-being and our mood. And good sleep helps to balance those hormones. So the better we sleep, the more balanced we are. And what happens is with all the changes that happen through menopause in terms of mood, anxiety is more prevalent, and then the hot flushes and the temperature issues. What happens is at nighttime we tend to be woken up by the hot flush. That then becomes a habit, and then people are starting to worry during the day about the lack of sleep. So the other elements and the other parts of being perimenopausal or menopausal are all going to start playing a role then as well. So it's triggered by the hormones, but it's what's maintaining it long term that we're tackling really with the treatments.
Because I think, and again, I'm not medically trained as well, but I think your body core temperature is meant to lower by, I can't remember if it's a half or a degree at nighttime, and then the hot flushes just don't really allow that to happen. So that's what triggers the wakefulness, I think, at night. And then, as you say, it's also the stress and anxiety which all play a part in it all that tend to exacerbate the symptoms. But I think it's something that's such a common problem for women in midlife that they start to experience these sleep problems, and it's getting to sleep, it's staying asleep, it's having actually proper sleep at night too. So I am really interested in cognitive behavioural therapy. Do you want to perhaps sort of explain to us what that is and how it works?
Yeah, definitely. So cognitive behavioural therapy for insomnia is a program of treatment which is focusing on the behaviours and the thoughts. So CBT, cognitive behavioural therapy, is used for anxiety and depression very successfully in mental health. It's used a lot through private therapists and NHS. CBT for insomnia is a very specific program in that we are looking at the things that fuel insomnia. So if I talk a little bit about how poor sleep develops, then it will make sense as to what we're tackling. So when, let's say that you're a perfectly normal sleeper, and then for whatever reason you go to bed and you have a poor night's sleep. So but let's say it's the beginnings of not being well or a hot flush or something. So you go to bed and you don't sleep very well. So there is a sort of triggering event. So some people are really aware of what that is, that it can be illness or bereavement, divorce, something massive at work. Some people aren't sure when it started. It just started to happen. So your sleep becomes disrupted. And this is the initial event. What happens is generally we are all pretty intolerant to poor sleep. So if I went to bed for the next 3 nights and didn't sleep well, by the weekend, I would be really aware of it. I'd be kind of thinking, I look a bit tired. I'd be thinking about it during the day, wondering what I should do. So then as time goes on, if we still haven't slept well, we'll start to Google it. So we'll perhaps buy something, maybe buy a spray, buy some vitamins, buy some different tablets, something different, not hormonal, herbal, sorry, it's something herbal, something hormonal. And cut to another month, it still hasn't worked. My stress is getting higher now. And I perhaps spoke to the doctor, maybe the doctor's given me some sleeping pills. Perhaps I've started changing things in my life, so I'm not going out in the evenings anymore. What I would certainly start doing is probably going to bed earlier. As I'm not sleeping well, I'm spending more time awake in bed. So what you can see is that the trigger is not that important, but what happens is the cycle that we then get in. So now when I think about bed a month or 2 later, I'm stressed. I'm wondering if I'm going to sleep well tonight. I'm thinking like, what if I still can't sleep? How does this end? Am I going to focus at work? Am I going to be too tired to be a good mum? I look horrible. I'm putting on weight because I can't exercise. I'm too tired. I'm not socializing. So my mood is affected. My anxiety is affected. And what all of this does is it puts great pressure on sleep. So the more we think about sleep, the harder it becomes to do. And so what's happening is we're getting into bed and we're thinking about sleep. We're worrying about it, and the problem is that is in itself triggering our internal fight or flight system. Our brain is saying to our bodies, there's something wrong, this is not a good place to be. And then our body is in the exact opposite state of the one that we would want to be in to sleep. When we're flooded with adrenaline, there's no part of us that's going to sleep at that time. And I think for women in menopause, it's particularly important that they understand that adrenaline response, because when we wake up with a hot flush, that's how it feels. So often your heart's racing, and you can feel sick and you're sweaty and you're hot, and it's all those symptoms of adrenaline, and it feels awful. It's really disruptive, and so it's no wonder that in those times it's really difficult to get back to sleep, because we are not designed to sleep when we feel like that. So CBT is about tackling, okay, behaviourally, what can I do to improve my chances of sleeping well? How can I restructure my body clock? How can I reset that clock? And then cognitively, what do I need to do in terms of my mindset and my thoughts in order to take some of this pressure off, because the pressure is not helping either.
So what are some of the behaviour and the cognitive tips that you give people then?
So the things that actually control our sleep, and I think the reason this is really important to understand actually what controls our sleep is because I don't know if you found this, but people are often buying and trying a lot of different things to improve their sleep because we're desperate and we'll kind of throw any amount of money at sleep, and I understand that. But because there's not a lot of evidence for those things, they can start making the problem worse. So what we actually need to control our sleep is, the first thing is a really strong appetite for sleep. So if you think of an elastic band, when you wake up in the morning, you start stretching that elastic band, it gets tighter and tighter as the day goes on. So the ideal scenario is that if your elastic band is really tight, then your appetite for sleep is going to be brilliant. Fall asleep quicker, you wake less in the night, or if you do wake, you get back to sleep faster. And then at the end of that, you wake up in the morning and you feel good for it. So your sleep appetite is really important. The things that would affect your sleep appetite is that if you were having a nap before bed, if you were falling asleep on the sofa, if you slept in the afternoon, those kind of things would take the edge off that appetite. So spending too long in bed. So the appetite's really important. The second thing that really matters is our body clock. So we know that our body clock is controlling not just sleep and weight, but also temperature, hunger, thirst. All of those things are controlled by our body clock. So when we get into a habit of, let's say, waking up at 2, 3, 4 in the morning, maybe from the hot flushes, if we do that enough, your body clock starts to alter. So for a lot of women in this situation, what's happening is their body is expecting to wake up. So that's part of the problem too. They're also waking up at times when they're not even having hot flushes. So your body gets used to being more fractured in terms of your body clock. So you wake up more regularly through the night. The more of a pattern it becomes, the more that your body will keep it going. And so we need your sleep drive to be high, but we also need your body clock to understand what it is you want it to do, and where we want you to sleep in that 24-hour period. And the reason we know that the body clock is so important is if you missed an entire night's sleep and got into bed at 7 a.m., you wouldn't sleep for 7 or 8 hours. So we know that we can't just take that time and put it somewhere else. We have to sort of build the building blocks. We have to teach ourselves how to sleep properly in the right window. And then the third thing which controls how well we sleep is our connection with our bed. So as I've kind of addressed a bit already, if you're spending 50% of the time that you're in bed stressed, hot and bothered, wound up, then actually your connection with your bed is very weak, and it can even become a cue for anxiety. So I can be really relaxed downstairs on the sofa, and then I get into bed and suddenly I'm wide awake and my heart's a bit racy and I'm feeling stressed. And that's because my bed is actually now triggering that, because I've spent so much time in there. So on that, the reason I kind of tell you that about what controls our sleep is that then we can see that actually a lot of the stuff that we would buy and do, they're sort of sticking plasters. They might make it a little bit more manageable. They might make it a bit more pleasant. If your room smells nicer, if you have better bedding, for example, these things are all going to make it more pleasant, but they're not going to be tackling your sleep drive, your body clock, and your connection with your bed. So in terms of things that people can do, shall I go through some tips that you could put into place straight away? So the first thing would be about the sleep appetite. So when we're sleeping poorly, the first thing that most of us do is go to bed earlier. So we would go to bed earlier and we would perhaps try and have a lie-in if we could during the morning. The first thing I would always advise people to do, regardless of the situation, is spend less time in bed, which sounds counterintuitive because we want more opportunity to sleep. But actually, if that sleep drive is higher, your quality of sleep is going to be improved. And it's really important to think about quality, not quantity. 8 hours of broken sleep is not better than 6 hours of pure quality sleep. So go for the quality. As we get older, there are so many things that are impacting on your sleep. The quantity is not going to be as easy to get, but the quality is the bit that will make you feel better. So if you're struggling to fall asleep or you're waking up through the night, tonight you would go to bed later and set your alarm earlier. So maybe you could go to bed an hour later, set your alarm an hour earlier. I work with lots of people who are going to bed at 9:30 because they're so tired because they're not getting enough sleep. They go to bed at 9:30. They either struggle to fall asleep or they're wide awake at 2 a.m. So what we're doing is we're pushing the sleep drive back further and further so that actually when you get into bed, let's say you got into bed at midnight and you set your alarm for 6 a.m., by midnight, you would have a really high drive. You're more likely to fall asleep. You're less likely to wake because that momentum is there for you. If you do wake, you'd hope you get back to sleep faster. Whatever happens at 6, your alarm goes off and you get up and out of bed. And if you can remain consistent with that routine for a few days, what will happen is you'll start to not only increase your sleep drive, but you're also teaching your body clock what to do, because you're saying, I won't go to bed any earlier. I'm not going to get up any later. I'm not going to sleep in the afternoon. Here's the window. Here's your 6 hours. I'm training you to sleep within that period. So short term, it can feel quite tough. If you can't shorten it that much, then don't worry. If you just did half an hour later and set your alarm half an hour earlier, that would be a step in the right direction. But what we're trying to do is just push that appetite for sleep as much as we can. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's really interesting as well because, as you say, it is counterintuitive. You think yourself, like, not being an expert, you think, oh, I need to get more sleep. I'll go to bed earlier, and then hopefully I've got more time for sleep. But it makes sense when you explain it though as well, that your body just has that window of opportunity to sleep. Really.
Yeah, and you know, if you think of it, that if we're getting into bed at 9:30 and you're not getting out until 7 a.m., the reality is, as you know, as an adult aged person, you can't sleep for that long. It's not possible. So you're giving yourself this huge window of time, and your body's clock is saying, okay, well, I can't sleep for all of it. So either I take ages to fall asleep, or I wait loads through the night, or I just have this very light, fractured sleep all night. So what we're doing is we're giving too much opportunity that doesn't work. So shorten it right down. It takes a lot of the it also takes a lot of the stress out of it. You know, being in bed, because I know that when we were younger, our mums would always say, well, at least you're resting. But actually ask yourself, how restful is it? You know, lying in bed, not being able to sleep is not very relaxing.
No, you're frustrated and you're worried. So it's interesting because what I thought you were going to say was exercise and move and do things like that. So not to lessen, presumably those parts of it as well.
Yeah, well, so the things like exercise and not too much caffeine, they're called sleep hygiene. Sleep hygiene is the thing that if you go to the doctor, they'll offer you sleep hygiene tips. It's the first page of Google. They're the things that you would get. What we know is that sleep hygiene doesn't actually help a sleep problem. Again, it's good lifestyle advice. It's certainly not bad advice. We should all be exercising, relaxing as much as we can, not drinking too much caffeine, not too much alcohol. It's all good advice. The problem comes when a person is so rigid in all of these things that aren't actually going to cure the problem, and they become so rigid in all of these things that actually the pressure to sleep is huge. So absolutely, exercise is great. But if you're thinking, right, I have to exercise, I can't drink any caffeine, I can't have any, I will not have a glass of wine, I won't do anything past 9 o'clock in case I work myself up, the reality is you're not going to sleep because that's far too much pressure. So a lot of the work we're doing is saying, just do way less, strip all of this back, just go to bed later, have a glass of wine if you want to have one night, go to the cinema, go out with a friend, like do stuff, fill the day a bit more. Don't over focus on sleep, because the more you focus on it, it's not going to work anyway. So sleep hygiene, good advice, but it's more lifestyle, health, a generally healthy lifestyle. And it certainly can improve your sleep if you're already a decent sleeper. It can certainly be part of a better, 24 hours. But if you are really struggling with sleep, i.e. you can't fall asleep or you're awake for periods in the night, sleep hygiene is not the thing that's going to be the main fix for you. And the sad thing is for everyone, including women, is that's the advice that we're constantly getting through the media and through, as I say, through Google. And the problem is that people are coming to me saying, I've tried everything. I've been so strict. I've been doing this for 2 years and I still can't sleep. If anything, it's worse than ever. So it's actually bad advice. It's making things worse for people. So be sensible with it. Of course, if you exercise, that makes you feel better than exercise. Equally, if you didn't get to exercise today, don't worry. That's not the reason why you're not going to sleep tonight.
Perfect. And so now moving on to body clock. What are your tips for body clock?
So in terms of your body clock, we want to reset your body clock so that your connection with bed is around sleep rather than being awake. So one of the first things that people do when they wake up in the night is check the time. I don't know, do you ever do that?
Definitely.
Everybody does it. The first thing we do is check the time. Now, the problem with checking the time is you are resetting that internal body clock every time to wake you up again. So if I set my alarm for 3 a.m. for a week, by next week I would probably wake up at 3 a.m. Without the alarm. So I've set my body clock to do that thing. And that's exactly what people are doing. So if you wake up at 2 in the morning and you're ruminating and you're worrying about something, you look at the time. The next night you look at the time again. So we are teaching our body, yes, you're correct, well done, you woke up at the right time. So the first thing I would say is turn your clock to the wall. If you can not have your phone as your alarm, even better. But just sort of make sure that you can't just like open your eyes and immediately see the time. So try and resist that temptation. So what that's doing is breaking a pattern. The second thing is so by going to bed later and getting up earlier, you're also fixing that body clock because you're teaching your body what to do. And then if you can't sleep, so this is particularly pertinent for women who are having hot flushes, if you wake up with a hot flush, and I'll talk a bit more in the next bit about what you can do with a hot flush, but if you wake up with a hot flush, if you're really wound up, if you're anxious and stressed, leave the bedroom. Just get up and go downstairs. There's absolutely no benefit to staying in bed. We tend to feel like, oh, well, at least I'm resting. You're not resting when you're in that state. You're feeling awful. And if you go downstairs, you can put the telly on, you can read a book for a bit, you could listen to some music, calm down, change your state of mind, and you're far more likely when you get back into bed to fall asleep than you would be if you just stayed there. But what you are doing by staying there is creating that really negative connection with your bed, and that's what we want women to avoid. I don't lie there feeling that terrible feeling. It's not pleasant. So get up and go downstairs.
That's really interesting. Again, not something I would have expected, because I know what I do. I try and, I maybe read a book in bed, or I try and calm myself down in bed. And I worry that I'll wake myself up if I go downstairs. But actually, it is having this association with good sleep and your bed. Yeah, I'm loving this. Okay, so let's talk about the hot flushes then in particular. What tips do you have for women who have hot flushes at night time?
So this one sounds a bit contradictory to what I've just said about leaving the bedroom, but one of the things that we teach people who are having an adrenaline response, so you're lying in bed, your heart's racing, you're really stressed. What we tend to, or like if that happens anytime during the day, that's a hot flush is very similar to a panic attack. It feels the same. What we tend to do is we want to stop it as fast as we can because it's such an unpleasant feeling. We want to stop it. So we have a glass of water, we take a deep breath, we look out the window, we go outside, we get out of the situation, we leave the supermarket, whatever it might be, or get up and out of bed. Now, the problem with doing that is that if you don't allow your body to see what happens, you're teaching it that you can't cope with the outcome. So therefore, the fear continues to build. And with hot flushes, they do feel awful. But what I would recommend to women is sometimes you wake up, you have the hot flush, just stay with it. Just lie in bed and start labeling everything. So become sort of a third person, label, my heart's racing, I'm feeling really sweaty. And allow it to be like, we know it's safe. It feels awful, but we know it's safe. You're not going to die. You're not going to pass out. None of the bad things that you feel are going to happen, but we need to see it in practice. So lie there, allow the adrenaline response to be there because it has to come back down. You can't stay in that state forever. So your adrenaline will start to reduce. And what you've done there is you've taught your brain, actually, although this is incredibly unpleasant and I hate it, it's actually not any worse than this. This is the bad bit. And I just dealt with it. And the effect is that it was horrible, but I'm okay. And if you keep doing that, what you're doing is you'll start to be less bothered by them. So you'll wake up with a hot flush, but it won't have the same impact because your body will no longer associate a hot flush with you're in danger, do something about it, get into fight or flight. And so we do this with people, even if it's not involving hot flushes, just any time where you're panicking, there's a bit of a limit. I don't want you to stay in bed all night feeling the panicky feeling to get over it. There's a time where you just need to get out of bed. But it is important to feel the uncomfortable feeling of anxiety, to teach yourself that it's horrible, but it's copable. And I think for women, that's a really big one that they can do. And after that, then go downstairs, calm down and so on. But if you are really struggling and if you have this urge, you just got to get out, of the situation, then learning to expose yourself to that feeling is a really useful technique.
I like the idea of identifying the different symptoms, the identifying and thinking, okay, my heart is racing. Okay, I can feel the sweat. And that in itself is probably quite a calming thing to do, just to to center your mind on your body and seeing how your body is responding and listening to your body again, which is so good.
It's a mindfulness technique, as in it's making you present focused. So that's why it is so helpful, because by labeling it, you're not in it anymore. It's not happening to you. You're just observing it. And then you can go on, that can go on to, okay, what do my sheets feel like? What can I smell in the room? What can I hear in the room? Because anything that gets you out of that sort of state is you teaching your body, actually, I can cope with this. You know, I don't like it, but I can cope with it. So it's a really useful technique.
It's already been an amazing chat, Kathryn. I'm learning so much, and I'm somebody who studies about sleep as well and tries to think about all the best ways to go to sleep. What have you seen is the impact of not having good sleep on women?
I would say it's probably more the mental health impact of it. That, you know, women tend to lead incredibly busy lives. We've always got a million and one things to do. There's always a lot on your mind. And sleep is a bit of a respite from that. And so if you're also awake during the night, you've kind of got a 24-hour, you know, groundhog situation where you're just always on the go. And it's exhausting, you know. Going through menopause is going to make you more tired anyway. There are lots of side effects that can be difficult to manage. And I think that knowing you then can't sleep either is horrible. So there is, I guess, for me, like I like to educate women in that it's rubbish, but it is also normal. You're not unusual that you can't sleep through this. You know, we're not designed to sleep when we're too hot or when we're too stressed. We probably can't get rid of these hot flushes entirely, like just with this sleep program. The sleep program is not going to stop the hot flushes, but it's just going to make it more manageable and more pleasant for you. So staying up a bit later and doing something you enjoy in the evening. Get up a little bit early. Now you've got a little bit of time to perhaps do some exercise if you can fit it, if you can't fit it in elsewhere. So sort of moving focus away from, if I can just get this good night's sleep, everything else will feel better, and saying, actually, let's try and make the other things better first, and then the sleep will follow. But I think really it's the mental health effects. Like I see a lot of women with, you know, real anxiety and mood problems because it's exhausting, and they're stuck. They're sort of trapped in this cycle that they're doing everything to fix it, and nothing's getting better. In fact, it's getting worse. But like you said, you study sleep, and for some, you know, reason, CBT for insomnia and these techniques are not widely known. And there's no reason for that, because they work really well. They've been studied for years. It's an effective treatment.
And everything you say makes sense as well. You know, as soon as it's been explained to you, it makes sense that you want to have a good relationship with your bed. If you have less opportunity to sleep, then you will sleep. And actually, when you were talking earlier, it reminded me a bit of the sort of sleep training I did with the kids when they're little, that you want to associate nighttime with sleep time, and when you move them away from sleeping during the day and you get them into that rhythm of just sleeping at night, it's a similar process. It's not dissimilar process anyway.
Yeah. I mean, you're exactly right that when we're born, we're not born knowing, we are all born knowing how to sleep, but we're not born knowing when. And so we teach our babies how long to sleep for. Otherwise, they just do 2 hours at a time. So we teach them to do that 8, 9, 10-hour stretch. And as an adult, what happens is that becomes disrupted for whatever reason. And it's normal to have disruption because of stress or whatever. But then what happens is we don't then relearn how to do it properly again. It starts to just drift more and more and more, and we add more things in. So we start trying so hard that it doesn't work. So a lot of this program is about just doing less. And, you know, I struggle a bit with, there's a lot of marketing things out there that are quick fixes, but they're not, and as I said, they're sticking plasters. They can make it more pleasant, but they're not tackling these things, so they can't fix it because that's not the root of the problem.
You've talked a lot today about anxiety as well, and that's as a result of having lack of sleep. Do you have any tips that women could implement during the day, perhaps, to manage their anxiety?
Yeah, absolutely. So the best tip that I can give, and this is to everybody, is every single day we tend to be on the go, especially women. You're busy all day and you don't have a chance to really process anything. So we might notice that we're worrying a bit about something here and there, but then our minds we're distracted. The problem is when you get into bed at night, your brain is going to take that opportunity to ask you to listen to it. So 3 o'clock in the morning, that's why suddenly all of these things feel, overwhelming. So worries feel massive in the middle of the night. So we need to encourage our brain to process these worries. We tend to want to just ignore them or distract ourselves from them, but again, they just keep trying to come back. So what I would advise is every day, pen and paper, same time every day, so 20 minutes, and you write down everything that's on your mind. So some of the worries will be about sleep, some of them could just be about life in general. Whatever it might be, you just write everything down and use this opportunity to really get it all out of your head. It's a very therapeutic way of saying to your brain, I'm not ignoring this stuff. I get it, whether it seems silly or not, it matters to me. For some reason or other, it matters. So I'm going to put it all down and I'm going to acknowledge it. And then what you can do is you can move on to looking at sort of 2 columns. So look at your list. How many things on there are real problems? And by real problem, I mean it's actually happening. So I have lost my job. I can't get access to HRT through my doctor. Whatever it might be, a real problem is something that's actually happened. And then the good thing about a real problem is that means that you have a certain level of control usually over that. So there is something you might be able to do. So what are you going to do next? What's your plan? Who are you going to ring? When are you going to do it? Put it all in your diary, and you've dealt with it. You can tick that box. The rest of the worries are very likely to be what if. So what if I can't sleep tonight? What if it impacts my health? What if I can't work properly? Now, that's not to say that these aren't real, because your brain is very smart in that you can feel just as anxious by thinking about a possibility as you would if it was actually happening. But what we can do is acknowledge that those are things that you're worried about, but also acknowledge that they're future. We don't know what's going to happen. So is there a plan that you can make? So yes, I could take on some CBT insomnia tips, and I'm going to try those. There's your plan. So learn to acknowledge it. Be kind to yourself. It's fine that you're worried about your ability to work when you can't sleep well, but then learning to let it go. And if you do this every day, you're getting into this habit of saying to your mind, it's a free-for-all. Say whatever you want to say in this time, and you have an open forum to do it, however silly it might seem. And then just make some plans for the things you can and let the rest go. And what this will do is it will mean that at night time, you'll find it much easier to let go of a worry because you've already dealt with it earlier on. So it's a time for processing. And I think that's really important for everyone, not just women, but I think everyone should try that.
No, that's great. And I think also not doing it immediately before you go to bed is a good idea as well, so that you've acknowledged those feelings during the day, and then they've got a place, and you've perhaps already processed them slightly and thought about them, so that you can just have them as their placeholder and look at them again tomorrow if there's something else going on. And Kathryn, you've just talked that through so clearly and so eloquently today, and it's just been something that's so easy to understand. So thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it. It's been absolutely excellent, and I've loved listening to you and loved hearing about how you've come to this place and how many people that you're helping. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
A special announcement from Salora, our show sponsor. Salora is a natural monthly supplement to support your mind and body in perimenopause and beyond. As a thank you for listening to our show, claim 50% off your first month using promo code UNPAUSE50 at salora.com.